Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public. We're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Wednesday. It is February the 28th, normally the last day of February, and therefore the last day of Black History Month, but we've got an extra day coming. And so we will enjoy the entirety of the January extension. Folks, I got some housekeeping stuff. Number one, I want to let you guys know that we have Mark Naughton. You can follow him on Twitter at MarkNaughton9, just the number 9 at the end of his name. And you can follow me and find him the same way. He is en route right now to a Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA, apparently burning up the streets going into New York. They have called a press conference to free Palestine, lest anything get fiery, but mostly peaceful out there. We have Mark Naughton en route to try to cover what's going on in New York City today. So I told him he was en route to the train, and I will check in with him after the show. But if you guys are looking for some live action coverage of whatever the heck is going on down there, they're usually good for at least some entertainment, maybe some foolishness, maybe some stupidity. For those of you who saw what today's show is about reasonableness, is about the reasonableness standard, which is to say that you don't always have to be correct. When we're talking about law enforcement, when we're talking about following orders, there is a standard, and the standard is that you may not know everything all at the same time. We're going to get into that specifically in the context of a video that came to light about a Proud Boy from Kansas. We have a member from that SWAT team joining me today. So if you have not already shared this, make sure we get some folks here to hear the story, because I think this is an important discussion. Not everybody knows all the things at all the time, and that is incredibly important when we evaluate law enforcement actions, and we're going to be doing that a little bit today. Before we do, I want to say thanks to sponsors. Let me do a couple of them right up front. First, I want to say thanks to my buddies over at Contingency Medical. Talked to the CEO just the other day, and some of you guys have already cashed in on this promo code. Definitely consider getting yourself one of their emergency medical packs. Go to contingencymedical.com. Again, contingencymedical.com. Do you guys notice I always reach off the screen? It's because I keep it right here with me, because this is where I spend my whole day. Contingencymedical.com. Get yourself one of these guys. The promo code is Kyle, just like everywhere else, Kyle. And what are you going to get? You're going to get antibiotics. You're going to get about 6 different courses of antibiotics. You're going to get a guidebook that's going to tell you the primary course that you should take, but if you've already used it, a contingency course that you could take. So you're not walking around in the world feeling terrible, having to wait on a doctor's appointment. You're not going to be wondering while you're on a trip, hey, is this going to be the day when I wake up, even though I'm far from home and not near any of my normal things? Am I going to wake up and feel terrible? You can start a course of action right away with antibiotics, with antiemetics, which are things that stop nausea and vomiting. They are the most magical things in the medical world to me. As someone who is a paramedic, I actually have a great story about this, which I'm going to just indulge in for a moment. We used this thing, Zofran, which is one of the things in this prescription box. We had probably like a 280-pound, 5'8", fat Mexican cholo-looking gangster with tattoos all over his head, and he couldn't breathe, and he was on we put him on an oxygen mask, and he kept pulling the mask out of the way and puking over and over and over again, all the way to the hospital. I had a brand new paramedic with me that I was training, and you let new paramedics make mistakes as long as it's not life-threatening, because they'll always remember it. Anyway, we get to the hospital, and they're like, hey, good job, good treatments, and they tell the kid that, and we go back, and I go, any challenges you had? And he goes, yeah, man, I couldn't get that guy to stop puking. He just kept pulling the oxygen mask off, so I couldn't get his O2 sats up the way we wanted. And I said, well, yeah, if only there was a drug that we had that would make you stop vomiting. What do you think? And he was like, oh no. It's like, you'll never forget that face. I'll never forget that face. Zofran is one of the things in the contingency medical pack. I know that's kind of a long thing, but good story too. Okay, we're going to do one more. I want to say thanks to my buddies over at Catholic Vote. You guys know that Catholic Vote is one of the major sponsors of this podcast. You can go to catholicvote.org. Today's loop is outstanding. And it covers a lot of the news that we are not going to cover. So if you're missing out on your daily dose of news, today's loop will get it for you. Wednesday, the 28th, Trump wins the key states, which is going to be Michigan. I think supposedly carried all 83 counties in a landslide. They're still trying to frame it like it was not a win. Like a third of the people voted for Nikki Haley. That doesn't sound like a win to me. 86% of voters say that the border is a serious issue. 61% saying a very serious issue. That goes based on Donald Trump numbers. That's almost 2x more based on a poll that was against 2019. Venezuela had a drop in crime. Isn't that interesting? As they started apparently exporting their criminals to us. Lots of good stuff in today's loop. Make sure you're going to catholicvote.org to follow the loop. And then you can also just type in catholicvote.org/loop if you want to read the loop. If you want the email, you can sign up on the website and you can follow them on social media at Catholic Vote. All right. Without too much further ado, it's probably time for me to bring on my guest. I'm going to unmute over here. We're going to bring on this character. Look at this guy. Hey, Garrett. What are you doing, man?
Good morning, Kyle. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really well, and I'm looking forward to kind of an interesting conversation. So one of the things that came out this week was this video, which we'll play in just a second here. And the video indicated essentially that there was a SWAT team that affected the arrest of a January 6er. And for those of us who follow this kind of thing, we went like, oh, okay. And then I realized where that SWAT team was. And I knew for a fact that you were going to tell me in the affirmative that, in fact, you had been there. Is that more or less correct?
Indeed. It's accurate.
So let's do a couple things. Let's get down this rabbit hole. Nobody knew you were coming on, so I kind of kept that a secret. I'm going to do two things.
I saw on the title, I was like, oh, he didn't tag me. He's keeping it secret.
Yeah, we're keeping it on the sly here. And the reason why is, one, I think the folks who watch the show who are used to listening to it, they already know your voice. They know what you're about. They know your value system. And that's why it's going to offer a different balance to this video that people saw. So we're going to talk about things that nobody else would be able to discuss, which is the briefing that you guys got before you went to this house. And then we're going to talk about where you were in that raid. Let me just show the video first. Actually, before we do that, I actually got this. You want to talk about this picture we're seeing on the screen right now?
Yeah. So I took that picture and I was on perimeter. So I'd been on SWAT for maybe 6 months. Mm-hmm. We tried out in June. And then we're brought up like late July, early August, and this was in February. So this was 2020 is when I tried out. This is February of 21. And FBI policy asserts that you cannot be on an enter and clear movement as part of the SWAT team unless you go to SWAT basics. So new guys like I was then, we drive the Bearcat, we drive other vehicles that are part of the package. And so I was driving a Suburban over there on the left hand side of the house, and
I'll throw it back up again.
I snapped that picture because of the contrast that I saw between the Bearcat in the right in the front there and the American flag hanging. And I wasn't in a habit of taking pictures on these things, and this, like I mentioned, it was early in my SWAT days, but 18 more months roughly of SWAT. I maybe took one other picture after like an op was over, but yeah, that was just a poignant, stark contrast for me. So I took that, and you know what? I'm glad I did. Now that this operation is coming to light 3 years later.
So let's do the video. Then we're going to do the context. We've got a story here from the, the Kansas City, what's the newspaper there? Times?
Kansas City
Star. Okay, so we're going to play the video first. We'll get an eye on that. It's not a long video, and it's obviously not that much of it. And then we're going to discuss some FBI SWAT stuff. And then we're going to get it in a larger context of what is reasonableness and what does that standard look like. And so here's the video, folks, if you have not seen it. I just want you to see this is a J6 subject. And we're going to talk about what that briefing looked like. Then we're going to talk about the reality of the case, that the agents knew that we're actually conducting it in just 1 second. Let's first see the video here. It's a little bit hard to watch. It's going to be hard to understand if you're just listening, but you're going to be basically hearing a SWAT team do an entry on a Ring doorbell camera. I just want to describe it up front. There's a woman that is standing outside holding a child. We'll get into all that in just 1 second here. And then you're hearing another officer or agent that is trying to calm the child down who is screaming. So here we go.
I got the door. I got the door. You guys go. Move it. Move it. Stay ready. I'll tell you when you bring it in. Yep.
He just had surgery. Nobody in our house.
Where is the surgery?
He got surgery on his left wrist.
Left wrist. Okay. It's okay, buddy. It's okay, buddy. It's okay, buddy.
He had surgery because he had a cyst. He just went to the VA on Friday.
Okay.
He had surgery.
Okay.
So you have to be really careful.
Okay.
All right, that's the entirety of the video. There's not much to it that we can see, only because that's the little snippet. This was released by the Gateway Pundit, and this was put out there as sort of an inflammatory piece. Let me just start off with the actual article here. So as I promised, Kansas City Star, this is the article, and it is entitled, "Former KC area Proud Boy, decorated Marine veteran, gets brief prison time in January 6th case." I actually think that's probably the most fair that I've seen them do these sort of things. It's telling, one, his affiliation with the Proud Boys, which is fine. And that's why they built the case on him. Two, he's a decorated Marine Corps veteran. That seems important. And his prison time is incredibly brief. What you're also seeing on there is a picture of him at that day. He's wearing what looks like probably a plate carrier under a jacket. He's got a helmet on. There's some other individuals that are next to him that look pretty familiar to me. And the story says that he was accused of conspiring with others in the Proud Boys group out of Kansas City to breach the Capitol. Then he was sentenced to 75 days in prison. He received 24 months of supervised release, 60-day home detention, so that's like sort of house arrest, and a $2,000 restitution. The government was asking for quite a bit more than that. He was 50 years old, lived in Olathe. Is that right? Did I say that right? It's been a while.
Yeah, that's correct. It's
Okay.
Olathe.
So charged with multiple felonies, conspiring. He was charged with multiple felonies, but obviously only convicted of basically a misdemeanor when it gets down to it because of the way that our sentencing looks. You can see you're talking about less than 3 months. They had asked for a 6-month prison stint, which is still misdemeanor territory. They wanted 3 years of probation instead of 2, and the $2,000 restitution. He was the 8th of the 10 residents in the state of Kansas that were indicted. Okay, so Garrett, let's do some, I'm going to give it to you the whole screen here. I want you to kind of explain that morning, if you, as much as you remember of it, the briefing, and kind of maybe set people up on how those things normally went, like sort of a SWAT team brief, what a team room looks like, and kind of paint that picture for folks.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been thinking about this a ton since Kyle sent me the link to the video, and the Kansas City Star piece is a little more fair, and I think just a little more accurate journalism. Like, it kind of includes a little bit of both sides. The Gateway Pundit piece, which is where the video came from, is definitely a little bit more inflammatory and not as accurate. And the video, honestly, I wish they would have released more of that video to give us a little more context. But I guess in part that's why I'm here. So, I'm like I said, I've been thinking about this a ton. It's really been weighing on me now that this is coming out, because heading into that day, so we're 1 month, roughly 1 month removed from January 6th, and I head up to Kansas City, usually the day before, because I was down in Wichita. So the handful of SWAT guys who were down in Wichita or wherever else, Springfield, Missouri, whatever, we would come up like the day before, because that's usually when we would do our brief. And so and then too, like I mentioned earlier, new guys drive. And so we typically would run the route from like the field office to where we're going to stage to, and then, to the target address or whatever. And so on this day, we're doing, if my memory serves, and I'm pretty sure it does, we did 3 of these J6 cases. And early on, like this, for whatever reason, and I think it's part of the reason why I snapped that picture, out of the 3, this was the one that I was like, I don't know, like hesitant about, or because he's a veteran or what, like just already maybe wondering, like, are we getting all the details here? Because as just a SWAT guy, you don't get much. You get what your team leader tells you. The case agent oftentimes isn't even in the SWAT brief because they're doing whatever a case agent should be doing and briefing their squad or whatever, and not the SWAT team. So it's all very like bifurcated, and you get told he's a 20-year veteran of the Marine Corps. He has weapons. This is why they asked for SWAT, and he participated in the riot at the Capitol. I don't even know if they were like referring to it as an insurrection yet. And these type of things, I don't remember if this was a direct quote from the team leader, but on these things it would be like something like this, like they asked for SWAT because they need us. They've determined that this person could potentially be violent.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you watched the video. You saw what happened.
There's always a checklist of things that allow, weapons present is one of them. And we will both go 100% and say that feds are cowards about weapons. I don't know why that is, but like just the presence of a gun in a home is literally one of the ticks, and it only takes 2 or 3 ticks on the little checklist for them to do that. A violent dog, violent or aggressive interactions with law enforcement in the past. Like, there's not very much it takes for the FBI to go and default to SWAT. A lot of that's because they've got physical agents that are not capable, or they don't feel confident to actually effect arrest the way that local police do. Would you agree?
For sure, I would agree. And, I forget exactly when this happened. You might remember off the top of your head when those 2 agents were killed in Florida. Then we saw
it was months earlier.
Okay, that's what I thought. And
so that happened at the end of 2020. We had a couple of agents that were killed on a different kind of arrest warrant. This was a child pornography warrant, but I think that's really good context too. The agency is incredibly overreactive. The FBI as a general whole is so risk averse. You folks you will never be able to appreciate that. But what's really, really critical about all this stuff too, they'll brief a skeleton of the case. And it's literally enough to say, this is the justification and this is why we're going in. This is the federal violation that you're looking for. And then, as you told me earlier, there was an allegation that he was manufacturing guns. Is that part of the story there?
Yeah. So that's another part of this particular incident. There was an allegation that he was manufacturing weapons in his basement, and that it was, for some reason, it was illegal. Like, he didn't have an FFL. I don't remember entirely the details on that part, but that was a key part as to why they wanted to use SWAT. And so, and two, also in that time frame, there was talk of making half of the Kansas City SWAT team full time, because there was talk of SWAT after those agents were killed in Florida. There was talk of SWAT doing every single arrest. And so I think it is important context, but this reason of him manufacturing weapons and, whatever, I don't even know if it's true. Based on what the DOJ released about this case, I would say that was not true, or he was not at least in violation of any federal gun law, because they didn't charge him with any of that. And those would certainly be a felony.
They would. Yeah. So here's the story. And this is the other problem. Most federal agents, would you agree, are not gun people the way that I'm a gun guy?
100%.
They don't know what they're...
I would say I'm a gun person more than most of them, and you got me beat in droves, so...
We always laugh. Producer Phil, who helped me start the show, would always say, like, I'm in the top, 1% or top 5% of all Americans when it comes to gun ownership and competency. And he was like, you're not even on that scale, because, I own more guns than there are fingers in my house, and there's 6 of us, right? Like, that's not a ton, not for real gun people. And that's also a light estimate, by the way. But I've got, I go out and buy guns by the 3 and 4 on a regular basis. I spend a significant amount of the disposable income I have towards that sort of thing. And then I care about the actual technologies, which is not common. And so we have people that know nothing about gun laws. I've literally accosted agents and gotten really dirty looks, because I've had people say, like, we bought 6 guns off this guy, in California. And I'm like, oh, 6 guns. Like, how long did you buy them over? And they're like 6 months. And I'm like, 6 guns is like a busy weekend for me. That would be a big weekend if I bought 6 guns in a weekend.
Yeah.
But I've done it, and these people have never even thought about buying their own guns. Right. And so the idea...
And they are anti-you and any other citizen owning guns.
Correct.
I think there are a lot of FBI agents who truly are anti your Second Amendment right.
They don't want it.
You to
have
and
so that fear is built into the agency, which is a real problem. Now, the idea that the agents don't have to be right, they have to be reasonable. Do you want to talk about the context where you've put that into my brain? Because I think it's a good point. We're going to be balanced about this. I'm not going to just sit here and punch the FBI for what it was, and I'm going to say why in a second. But I think it's worth discussing that reasonableness standard that you like to quote.
Yeah, for sure. This is one of the things that has stuck with me since my early days in law enforcement. So, and I first picked it up in my police academy. My police chief, my police chief from the police department I worked at was one of the instructors at the police academy I went to. And he would always say, you don't have to be right. You just have to be reasonable. And that carried over until once I was done with the police academy and working. On occasion, if there was a bigger incident, he would show up in roll call and would say that same type of thing. Like, hey, let's play the video, the dash cam, whatever of this incident. And he would talk about this reasonableness standard. And it is essentially based on another law enforcement term, the totality of the circumstances. So what you as a law enforcement officer are privy to at the time, it could prove wrong later. So for instance, there was a case in Milwaukee years ago. This is another one I picked up in school from a Milwaukee detective. This kid had like a Walkman and like, the old tape player type, and he's not obeying an officer's commands. It's nighttime. He ends up like grabbing the Walkman. Cop thinks it's a gun. Dude's not obeying the commands. He gets shot. And the cop was cleared. The cop ended up being wrong on what it actually was. But this reasonableness standard is, would a reasonable law enforcement officer have taken the same or similar action under the same set of circumstances that you were aware of?
It's not that hard to grasp. The problem is that it's when it's wrong, it's so egregious to people, and it's such a massive difficulty for people to really digest that problem, which is to say, you're looking at it with all the facts and you can't unknow the things that you know, right? I mean, that's the real issue here. It's the same story as people critiquing that guy who was in front of the Israeli embassy the other day. That security officer or that uniform division from Secret Service, they only know what they know. They don't know if that guy's a fake. They don't know if those are real flames. They probably can smell that the uniform is burning, but they don't know if it's a distraction. They don't know if that guy's gone in there to suicide himself and somebody else is going to be the problem. So having a weapon out is the response that you have. And so people who want to go and criticize that, it's a man in the arena moment.
Yeah.
The man in the arena only knows what the man knows, and anybody sitting on the sidelines, all they can assess was, if you were in that same situation, would you have done the same thing? Maybe not. But was it reasonable for someone to act in that manner? And that's where we cover down. And that's why 1 month after January 6th, the information was still not very obvious. I was still just in the situation where they were pulling us into the office, right? We were getting these moments where we're getting glimpses of what the agency was doing. And it's starting to look very political. But is it obvious? No. I want to have you speak about a little bit. You've been on a number of search warrants at this point, right? You've done them as local. You've also probably done a bunch with the feds, and you did several as SWAT, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't even tell you at this point how many combined I've done.
How many houses did you go into that were that nice? How many neighborhoods did you drive into that look that way? Let's talk about that's one of the big contrasts that strikes me.
Yes.
I've been on a bunch. I've been on, close to 100 search warrants, I think. I've never seen that neighborhood taken down with SWAT in the yard.
This was another thing I think that played a part for me because that's exactly right. That type of neighborhood. And look, let's be frank. Can people who live in nice neighborhoods commit crimes? Absolutely, they can. But in my experience, very, 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 very seldom to be in a neighborhood that nice. It was a new neighborhood. Olathe is a relatively prominent suburb of Kansas City on the Kansas side, and it's a nice community. So that was another one of the things where it's like, is this adding up? Like, what is actually going on here? And now look, if you go and read that Kansas City Star article, there's some parts in there where Christopher, I think you say it, Kuehne, Christopher Kuehne is communicating with the CHS, but then later that CHS says, actually the only thing we did while we were in the Capitol was pick up trash, and he was kind of directing us to do that type of thing. And then what happens? The FBI burns that CHS. So like, I didn't know that then. I don't even know if I knew that he was communicating with the CHS or that a CHS was with him and his group from Kansas at the Capitol. But yes, Olathe, that community. So this is another thing that stood out actually, and this didn't happen very often. That picture that I took that you showed earlier, on the other side of the Bearcat, there's a house like in the background there. Okay. The owner of that house came out and was basically accosting us for being there and saying, get the F out of here. And he was like an older, white guy. And I remember thinking, like, I wonder if he's right. Like, he probably knows his neighbor better than we do. And like, that stuck with me too. And like, you go in the hood and you get accosted all the time.
For sure.
But for some, there was a contrast there. And I remember like a sense of uneasiness. This is partly why I took that picture, and just knowing that it is compartmentalized on purpose. And then thinking, did my SWAT team leader do his due diligence? Should I have gone digging in the case file? What did the case agent, how did the case agent pitch this? What type of creative report writing was he engaged in to manufacture that? Like, these are things I've been thinking the last couple of days, especially since that video came out.
And this is why you and I are in the situation we're in, because we have that moment of self-reflection. It's something that the agency, the FBI in general, seems wholly unprepared to do. There are a very small number of people that are doing it. And yesterday's conversation with Victor Avila, I brought up something that is haunting me right now, because an agent reached out to me and said, we are the modern day slave patrols. I want that to sink in for people that are listening at this exact moment. I had an FBI agent tell me that on evaluation of what they are doing because of the Biden border policy and because of the way that the FBI operates, compartmentalized as it is, he's calling them a slave patrol. So if you don't know what the slave patrols were, essentially, as slaves began escaping from various places in the South, the slave patrols were early mechanisms of law enforcement that would round up those slaves that escaped, and it would bring them back to the slave owners. Now, here's the context that this is the case. The individual that reached out to me stated that they are running down kidnapped, quote unquote, kidnapped or missing and runaway young girls. And those young girls are illegal. They're here illegally. They have no documentation that says that they are tied to the person that reported them missing. And so the FBI does what it does. It actually runs down. It's very good at finding people, which is why the pipe bomber case is so unusual to this. Like, they're really good at finding human beings. And the Marshal Service is part of it as well. They are catching these girls that have run away or that are kidnapped, quote unquote, kidnapped, and they are bringing them back to somebody. But unlike under the Trump administration, where there was a familial DNA test between the people that came across the border, this is my daughter, this is my child, okay, we swab and verify. Oh, no, that's not true. They're not doing that anymore. So there's no way to justify or validate that this person has any claim to this child, and they are being returned. And the young girls, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, are looking awfully upset about it. And the agents are having this sinking feeling that they are participating in evil. And they are the modern day slave patrols, if that is the case. And it's sexual slavery, not forced labor, chattel slavery like we saw in the American South. That's an incredible problem.
It is.
But it's compartmentalized, as you just said.
It's compartmentalized, which is a huge part of the problem. And then, so think, you just mentioned it. This is why you and I are now in the position we're in. At that time, I wasn't saying to anybody like, hey, what do you think about this? Do you think this is legit? I would say, and if I was a betting man, I would bet that I was not the only person who had questions about this that were unanswered, or like this sense of unease. But we all just did it. We've talked about driving the train, the driver, the train conductor for the Holocaust. Like, I drove the train that day. Is how I've been looking at it. And it pisses me off, Kyle. It makes me really upset, really angry, really ashamed. And okay, you didn't know at the time. Well, I don't know. I don't buy that. I honestly, I actually want to ask the Kuehne family for forgiveness today. And because you saw that video, that his wife running out there with their child. There's also reports that she miscarried the next day.
Yep.
I have no reason to doubt that. I don't know if she's pregnant or not, but that's what's being reported. And if that's true, it's even more horrifying.
No, it's the worst thing that could happen. It's a baby that was sacrificed for a case agent grabbing a stat or some fear that federal agents had of doing their job. Do you know if he was given an opportunity to surrender? I'm guessing not, but I don't know. You don't know.
I don't know, but this is where the plot thickens a little bit more. So he was sentenced to 75 days, which makes me question even more. So 3 years later, it took him, and he gets 75 days.
Right.
Did we really actually need to be there in the first place? I would assert to you today that the answer is no. And then even more so to bolster that, by the time he does come out, because she came out and I don't think my memory serves correctly. Nobody went to the door. There was announcements from the Bearcat. There's the negotiators trying to call. And then she comes out with the child and is like yelling at us and saying like, he's disabled or he just had surgery or something like that. By the time Christopher Kuehne comes out, his arm is in a sling. And it's like, case agent didn't brief us up on that. Right. You really think a guy who just had shoulder surgery or whatever happened is a threat? You really think that you can't put Kansas City SOG on the house for a week and find his pattern of life and say, hey, the best time to intervene. Oh, by the way, he's got his shoulder in a sling.
Right. He just got out of a surgical facility and looked like he was not driving and he was limping along or whatever the situation is, which is SOP if you're dealing with someone that is a real threat.
Right. And so it's like and look, I also will say I was on SWAT. There is a time and a place for SWAT, but we need to be doing these things better than we are. And we're not doing them appropriately anymore. And you mentioned the slavery connection, and you won't be surprised, and probably people in the audience won't be either. There's a huge Holocaust connection here too. And it's Holocaust Memorial Museum 101. Go on their website. They have a ton of resources there. I'll just read a little bit from it. Nazi leaders relied on local police in Germany and across Europe to help carry out the Holocaust. Many police officers were not Nazis or extremists. That's the same with the FBI and police. They were not Nazis or extremists. They are not Nazis or extremists. Nevertheless, they often arrested Jews or fill in the blank today, J6ers or whatever, helped deport them to camps, the DC Gulag, and killed them in mass shootings. We're not quite there yet. Well, I guess say that to the guy in Utah that FBI SWAT killed a few months back. Some acted out of deep hatred while others claimed to be following orders. Opportunities to advance in the workplace, bonds with other officers, and a sense of duty also led many to join in the persecution. I mean, honestly, you just change a few words.
Yeah.
That's today. That's the FBI. That's where we are. That's where I was that day.
This is what I want people to understand, because it's a very subtle concept. This is not a Fox News hit. This is not a 3 minutes on national television where we just say something and we say, it's really bad, like we should be outraged. No, this is actually much more troubling, because what we're talking about is betrayal. It's the same thing that I talked about with Victor yesterday. And if you guys didn't listen to that interview, definitely go listen to it. Apparently, it was moving for some of you. It's all old hat to me. But the information about what's happening at our border, it's the same betrayal that when the government, which you have given trust to, and you have offered to be an agent of the government, that's literally what we're talking about here. As an agent of the government, you believe that they will judiciously deploy you where you may have to use deadly force, where you're going to use the physical capabilities, the long arm of the law to draw people in, and that you will not be abused because the thing that you bring to bear is both terrifying and awesome at the same time. And for an agency to lightly use that force, which is in fact an incredible, strong force, it's very damaging to the trust of those within it. That's why FBI morale right now is so low. Many people at that time where Garrett was at did not know, could not know. It is compartmentalized. And so the question is this: at that time, can we really say that the people that were on that raid, that went in and did the thing, they were being ordered under, they have a judge's order to effect an arrest. They've been briefed that this person is a threat, and they have no reason to doubt otherwise. Today, they have no reason to believe otherwise, and that's a big difference. As time goes on, that reasonableness standard, like, is it reasonable to assume that the case agent who hasn't lied to you before, who has given you other cases to go do work on, is in fact telling you that this is a problem? Have we arrested people that are legitimately threatening? Yes. Have we brought people into custody that might have surrendered, but you don't know, and it's much better to do overwhelming force? Absolutely. Can you believe that today about this? I'm going to read some stuff from the article real quick, Garrett. So I'll give you a breather as we I'll take you off the camera. I want to read this because the stuff that's on the screen right now, folks, is really, really important. This is what was the fairest take on it, I think. It says that 6 people were charged with conspiracy, including this gentleman, Chris Kuehne. They were charged with conspiracy, obstruction of official proceedings, civil disorder, and entering and remaining in a restricted building and grounds. There was also a guy named Cressman, whose first name, William Cressman, Bill Cressman, was also charged with threatening to assault a federal officer and carrying a wooden axe handle. Again, this insurrection narrative falls apart just on its own weight with that stupidity. The interesting part, I think, that I wrote down is that in the charging documents, they were talking about Kuehne stressing the importance of having recognizable identifiers, such as a piece of reflective tape that would allow members of the group to recognize each other. This was the piece that they were hinging the quote-unquote conspiracy to do whatever they were doing. They were obviously conspiratorial. Why? Because they were bringing orange tape. Do you know who else uses reflective tape, Garrett, in these settings, in large crowd settings?
Law enforcement.
That's exactly right. The National Special Security Event Protocols that the Secret Service puts out requires that everybody who is going to be federal law enforcement and that is going to be on the same blue team, they're going to put a piece of tape that is unique. Usually it's like some kind of chevron pattern. It's either black and white, or it's orange and white, or it's orange and red, or it's purple. It's something specific to identify the slide of the weapon as a law enforcement weapon on both sides. So if it's drawn and it's presented, in fact, you guys were speculating whether or not I have guns right next to me. Of course I do. So let me just show this. So I've got this 1911 right here, and it's clear and safe. I think that's what they do on the YouTube thing, right? So clear, safe. They put a thing right here on the outside of the slide where it's visible. So as the barrel is pointed forward, anybody who's seeing it laterally is going to see that there is in fact reflective tape on here and on here. So any angle that you were to see, you'd see this retroreflective tape, which is really important and critical. They want you to know, they want to identify who you are. And so identifying your friend or foe in a group is standard. In fact, the military does it, law enforcement does it. It is IFF is what it's called. Is a regular operational situation. They accuse this guy of being in a conspiracy because of that. Now, here's the other thing. This, like I said, this is a very fair article. It says
it's the most fair I've come across, because, like I said, this has been weighing on me since you first sent me that video a few days ago.
So Garrett actually sent me this particular article. So in the days after the riot, the government document says that Kuehne destroyed evidence of the crime, which was what, that they walked around. And then his own sentencing memorandum is very different than what the government's argument was. Here's the government's argument. They said he was an exceptional child who at the age of 9 saved his 2-year-old sister from a burning car and began working at the age of 13. He served multiple tours of duty in the military, became a decorated Marine veteran. Many of the awards included a Purple Heart, and he was the one who gave the actual commands for the 21-gun salute at President Ronald Reagan's private funeral, which is to say he was in the honor guard there, which is a very specific type of honor. He joined the Proud Boys because they were supposed to help protect patriots from violent groups like Antifa. That's not a bad thing in and of itself. That's an important distinction. I'm going to keep running through this article only just because I want to color it with the information that we know at the time and the information that we find out afterwards. The government said that he entered the Capitol. Oh, sorry. He argued that he entered the Capitol to safeguard property and then disassociated himself with the Proud Boys after that. He stopped an individual from stealing an item from the U.S. Capitol building, stopped people from breaking items, made people clean up trash, and stopped a man from smoking marijuana in one of the offices in the Capitol building. Okay? The filing mentions, this is the part that I find really damning, and Garrett, I'm going to get you to comment on this. We've run sources, we know what this is about. Kuehne's filing mentions an FBI informant who is referred to as Aaron, who traveled to Washington, D.C. with the KC Proud Boys group and participated in the riot with him. The document says Aaron asked Kuehne to help him move a podium inside the U.S. Capitol, and the two placed it under a metal gate as it was closing. Aaron later explained to his FBI handlers the reason they moved the podium was to prevent rioters from tearing it down. They used the metal pieces of the gate as weapons, so they were trying to stop that sort of violence. He said, quote, about Christopher Kuehne, he made people pick up trash, and he helped de-escalate the standoff with cops. So what happens after that? The FBI burns the source. And we both know how interesting it is. This particular source was actually used in another criminal case with another J6 defendant. And now they're like, well, he's not credible. He's obviously not credible because he's not helping our case. Not that we care about truth or honesty. Maybe he was being honest. Sounds honest. Sounds like what we saw.
So that's the part that I want to know. I would like to see that CHS closing document. What did you actually close him for? Because he was telling you the truth and you didn't like it because it was going against your case because you're more concerned about an arrest and a stat and a disruption because, oh, it's terrorism. This is domestic terrorism. So we'll get a disruption on it too. And oh man, the CHS is just reporting to me like they always have, but
this time it's not convenient.
It's not convenient. It's not good for my case. So you know what? I'm going to find a way to shut them down. And quite frankly, that's what I'm assuming at this point. How can you trust anything we're being told from the DOJ? How can you trust anything they're saying about Christopher Kuehne or about the CHS Aaron? Because Here's what I bet you. Not I bet. I guarantee you this is what happened. Aaron, hey, my group, we're going to January 6th. Yeah, I remember you asked me about that the other day, because now Aaron wouldn't know this, but you and I know this. The FBI, they asked if anybody was going, and so the agent handling him says, "Hey, Aaron, are you going to January 6th? Maybe even prompt your group to go," or maybe they had already decided. I don't know, whatever. Aaron gets paid to go.
Yep.
He gets his lodging and his food and all of that taken care of, and then he probably gets a few $1,000s or more on top of it when he comes back and says, "Hey, yeah, I think we got a case on the guys I was with because this is what they did." Oh, and by the way, Aaron at the time is covered because he probably got an OIA, otherwise illegal activity authorization. So he's covered to break the law.
Yes.
But the guys he's with are not. Oh, but now he's saying, "Hey, yeah, actually, we were just picking up trash. He was de-escalating with the police. We were trying to stop people from using this podium or whatever as a weapon. And that's not good for my case. So you know what? I'm going to figure out a way to burn you down."
Mm-hmm. That is the most plausible scenario. Now, this is not unique. This is the reason why I want to share this and why this was so important to me. Steve Friend had a similar experience on SWAT that you did. The case brief did not match up to the threat on the ground. And so, again, the concept of reasonableness, what you were told, what you knew at the time, is the only way that we can evaluate those people. And unfortunately, for most members of the public, they're never going to hear what was briefed to the team at the time. The team looks like the jackbooted thugs. They look like the demons. They look like the people that are enacting and are the physical manifestation of evil. But that's not necessarily a fair assessment. And that's part of what I do, part of what we are able to do now in a way that nobody else has probably been able to do in a long time. Steve was given a brief on the Gretchen Whitmer case when they participated in a multi-state, multi-regional SWAT operation to bring these guys down. And they were shown videos. They were obviously like YouTube highlight reels of like how badass these guys were, to the point where, as Steve has said it in interviews with me before, they got very, very serious. They described them as near peer, which is a really lame term. But near peer is someone that has the skill set that you do. If you were going against a near peer force, those are people that have training, capabilities, operational weapon systems, that have tactics that mirror your own. And so you are in what I would call like a fair fight, which is the opposite of what law enforcement is looking for when they do SWAT operations, right? We're trying to overwhelm. So Steve had that same moment. And the minute that they put the guy into custody and they're like, basically, this guy's Officer Doofy, and he basically is a mentally struggling, destitute human being who has absolutely no ability to do the things that they showed us in that video, we were conned. And in the same way, I believe when somebody tells you that, if they bring up the concept that this guy's manufacturing weapons in his basement, like that's somehow a problem, you probably didn't know at the time that that's not a federal crime to manufacture weapons. As long as they're for personal use, you can manufacture all you want. And I've done it. I've made polymer 80s. I've gone out there. You can build all kinds of, you can go and get a pipe, you can cut it, and you can put a primer striker on it, and you can set up a chamber, and you can shoot it out of a pipe. You can make a pipe shotgun if you like. That's legal. That's American. Right. There's a long tradition of creating your own weapons. But when presented, I want to
say that they added something, like he was selling them, or they had auto steers or something to make it a crime,
which we know they would have charged him with if that was the case.
Right. So so obviously not the case. And then too, him being in the sling, like, it's just like, how did nobody know that, or did they and not tell us? And then too, like you said, like, I had no reason to doubt my team leader. Why would I? At that point in those first 6 months, I'd probably been on 25, 30. Say again?
Keywords, at that point. And that's really where it comes down to. We have to look at the time and the circumstances. And a lot of this I'm hammering home is reasonableness. A lot of it is ignorance too. I've told people that like in 2017, I got a briefing about the members of the far right or the alt-right, and it was so absurdly stupid. It included Proud Boy stuff. I'm going to show you what's in this article too, what the government argued and what's reality. And so we'll do this real quick from the Casey Star article. So folks, if you're seeing on the screen right now, this is a little bit more of that quotation. The government filed a motion on Thursday saying that the informant who testified also in Ethan Nordine's trial, who's been on the show, was an unreliable witness, and that the credibility of his reporting was impeached on several issues. Obviously, the court should view it with skepticism. He was a participant. Then they also said that one of the issues was that there was a text message that Chris Kuehne received, And the text message said he received his first degree on the evening of January 6th. It's a celebration of his participation, not a disavowal of what happened there. It said that his phone contained a deleted message on January 6th from the riot where the sender congratulates him and says, congrats on the first degree. In other words, being a first level formal Proud Boy in the initiation. So that sounds really incriminating that he got, first of all, he didn't send it. He didn't say, give me my first degree. Someone else sent it, which you are not responsible for in this country. But more importantly, I pulled this from Business Insider, how a man becomes a boy. This is a really, really one-sided article, by the way. It's called We Are the Proud Boys, and it's this garbage Business Insider piece. But it said, based on extensive research and information gleaned from left-wing informants within the organization, possibly the gayest paragraph ever written by someone who believes that they're a reporter. The senior editor at the HuffPost says that there are 4 tiers of membership within the Proud Boys. By the way, you could also just listen to Gavin McInnes, who's talked about this long form in very open formats. You don't need a freaking left-wing informant. Just listen to him talking to people like Joe Rogan or any of the other podcasts that he went on, because he talked about this a lot. The first degree that you receive as a Proud Boy, so they have degrees 1 through 4, is that you declare allegiance to the Proud Boys open and often, online and in your personal life. All of those are options. In other words, you basically just say, yeah, I'm a Proud Boy. So you and I could be first degree Proud Boys right now on the show. That's how exclusive that first degree is. The first degree was that he basically participated in something with them publicly, which you're allowed to, it turns out, in America.
And for the FBI, the case agent, the AUSA, whoever, including that little bit taken out of context, and they wonder why we don't trust them. They wonder why we can't trust them. They wonder why people like us came forward and said, there's actually a lot of things going pretty haywire inside the DOJ, inside the FBI. Well, it's because of crap like that. Like, you're plucking this out to try to prove your point, but the broader context reveals that you're nothing but a lying piece of garbage. When you have this allegedly noble duty to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and you're lying. And in this case, I would say it's even worse. It's worse than me saying your live on air sign behind you is red when we all know it's blue. That's a direct lie. But they're deceiving here by pulling that text, and that's even worse. Because I asked my daughters this.
There's the red one, by the way.
Lies?
I got the red one.
Oh, that one's red.
Yeah, that one's red. I don't want to make you a liar, but go ahead.
You got it covered.
I got you.
Who's the father of lies? It's Satan.
Mm-hmm.
And that deception and that twisting is from the pits of hell, man. When you're supposed to uphold the truth, when you're supposed to uphold justice. And it's like, well, any little piece that I can twist and turn to try to make this person the evil, wicked felon that he is, when everybody knows, well, now that they aren't. And what's going to happen to that case agent? What's going to happen to that AUSA?
Nothing. I didn't want to leave you on the line here by yourself as the only person that's ever done these things where you participate in a case and feel like you were deceived. So I'm going to share one of mine. It's one that bothers me, and I think it's really important that we do it. First, let me just say thanks to my buddies at Patriot Cooler, who have not deceived anybody as far as I can tell. They have actually provided a wonderful product, and they've been supporting our show since February of last year, which is incredible. Go to patriotcoolers.com. This is my mug that I'm drinking from right now. This is the 16 ounce. It's actually fantastic if you're not going to take it in a vehicle, because it will not fit in most cup holders. 16-ounce coffee mug, says Patriot right on the side, 50 stars on the bottom. They have an outstanding design. You can also see the Seraphin family minivan crammed full of groceries. We carry our Patriot 50-quart hard-sided every single day. There's more times that my wife gets into one of these moments where she's like, hey, I want to go to the grocery store, but I also have to run another errand. And the idea that we could actually put the temperature controlled stuff in there, you guys, if you're not doing that with your coolers, you're missing out on an interesting opportunity. It takes up a lot of space, but it's totally worthwhile. PatriotCoolers.com. The promo code is Kyle, K-Y-L-E. Again, K-Y-L-E is the promo code to save yourself 10%. If you spend $50 or more, you're going to get free shipping. They've got backpack coolers. They've got soft-sided coolers you can carry your lunch in. They've got the hard-sided one that you just saw, obviously. And then they've got all the different tumbler products, which are outstanding. They go head-to-head with Yeti or Stanley or anybody else, and they are as good or better. I think they're better. They look better, and they say something that's a little bit more familiar to me. They actually keep the drinks that I put in there warmer on Sunday morning. So consider checking out patriotcoolers.com. Use the promo code Kyle if you do. And it's the same discount you get if you're in the military, by the way. They have a military discount. Don't be siding off there. Give us the credit. We appreciate you guys doing that. Still save the same amount of money, but it just lets them know that we're supporting their efforts. They're supporting our efforts. Again. All right. Let me not leave you on the hook here, if you don't mind, Garrett. I want to read this one because this is quite important to me. This is coming from that complaint that I sent you, which you've now have a little bit of familiarity with. And folks, on the screen, what you're seeing is a DOJ press release. Tampa man sentenced to 18 years for attempting to provide material support to ISIS. Well, that sounds like a thing we want to do, right? Tampa judge, U.S. District, Thomas Barber, sentenced Mohammed Matmez al-Azhari, 26 years old, to 18 years in federal prison, followed by lifetime of parole for attempting to provide material support to a designated foreign terrorist organization, specifically ISIS. The court ordered that he forfeit certain assets that were traceable as proceeds from the offense, including gear and so on and so forth. Well, none of that sounds terrible. So he's 26 years old in February of 2023. Let's go back 3 years. He's 23 in 2020 when I was following him around. And so there's some really interesting pieces in the press release here. It says, according to the court documents, he pled guilty February of 23. Spent most of his life abroad. Well, he's only 26 years old, so that should tell you something. He began to embrace dogmatic Islamist or Salafist beliefs. He was released from a Saudi prison in 2018. Okay. The story goes is that this guy happened to be in a Saudi prison for a terrorism charge, which is pretty suspect because I don't think that we think there's a lot of fairness in the Saudi kingdom. Their human rights violations are pretty significant. And what it says is that he had multiple interactions with a FBI undercover employee, what we call a UCE, and a confidential human source, a CHS, in April and May of 2020. I was there in Tampa in May of 2020 when he was arrested. My team was one of the last groups that was surveilling him just before the SWAT team came and took him down. At the time, he was in the process of buying guns from an undercover employee, and including a fully automatic rifle, which, by the way, wasn't fully automatic. It was just a weapon system that they presented, and it probably wasn't even with a real firing pin. He was arrested on state charges for carrying a concealed weapon without a permit. And then after he was released from state custody, he tried to buy firearms from the UCE. He met with the CHS, attempted to convert the CHS to Islam, confided in the CHS about his affiliation with ISIS, which he did swear allegiance to. And it details all this kind of stuff, how he planned to send money as well as material support. He also wanted to kill people. He wanted to do robberies, home invasion robberies, murders, etc. This guy was a bad dude. He tried to buy a suppressed handgun, a Glock, and a silencer from the FBI. All of that sounds pretty good on the up and up, does it not? That sounds like a righteous case.
Certainly does, based on the way they presented it there.
Now, here's the real problem. In the criminal complaint, in the affidavit, which I'm looking at off my screen over here, they made up facts, including the fact that he was a felon who could not possess a firearm because he was convicted of, as a juvenile, by the way, he was convicted of terrorist offenses in Saudi Arabia. Now, you know and I know that if you are convicted of a crime in a foreign nation as a juvenile, even if you're convicted in the United States, by the way, as a juvenile, you're not going to forfeit your ability to own a firearm under 18 U.S.C. 922. That doesn't happen. He's a U.S. citizen who had every right to own them and legally bought them previously. So the FBI manufactured facts in this. There was a substantial lie about that. And then the other problem, which is saying he spent most of his time overseas. He spent a lot of his time from puberty on in a Saudi prison being tortured. And this is the classic story that my team used to refer to as the Twisted Wiener story. The Twisted Wiener story is that while he was being interrogated by FBI agents, before they arrested him, by the way, this was just a voluntary interview, and as they moved into an interrogation, he said, I have a hard time meeting girls. He copped to a bunch of mental problems, and their case brief to us was that he was basically psychopathic. He wasn't sociopathic. He had basically had a real break with reality. He didn't know what was real and what was not. And he hadn't slept in something like 6 months. And we knew that because they had wires in his house and they were able to listen to every single thing he did. And he never slept for more than 45 minutes to an hour. Imagine basically every mom who's ever had a newborn baby, except it just never stopped because he woke himself up with his own alarm system and read the Quran until he sobbed. But the crazy thing is that he had acid dripped on his genitals and his legs and his pelvic girdle to the point where they scarred up his entire pelvic girdle. And he claimed that his penis was deformed by the Saudi government. Then he was put back in a cell with his father, who betrayed him. And the father beat the shit out of him over and over again because his father didn't want to be involved in being in prison. And he basically said, no, it's all my son's idea, this 16-year-old kid. The one relationship you wouldn't want to expect to betray you. Yeah. The guy betrays him. So now he's getting the crap beaten out of him in his cell. He's getting the crap beat out of him by the Saudis. He's getting acid dripped on him. And the agents knew that. And they, and they were aware that all this stuff had happened. So all this stuff happens, and rather than do the Baker Act thing, you were a local cop, somebody calls you up and says, hey, my buddy is not well, and he probably shouldn't own guns. He needs to be psych evaluated. What can you do?
You can do a mental eval on them, and if you have basically probable cause, but it's criteria. In Wisconsin, we call that criteria. Then you take them to the hospital, and then like an actual mental health provider or doctor comes and does their own eval, and then you take them over to the county mental health facility, and they stay there for 3 days or maybe longer, and hopefully get some additional follow-on care that they need. And in this case, it's like, well, all of that detail, all of that context, like, yeah, a Saudi prison will do that to you. It'll cause you to break. And now he's here, and instead of using America and our greatness to actually help this person, well, we'll just throw him in prison because terrorism, because I need a stat, because I need a case, because I can use an undercover, because I can use a CHS, because I can get all of these things annotated for. I bet you they worked this case for at least a year, because you got to keep it going. It's not the only case they've done this before. They did it a decade earlier, and so producer Phil was on one like that was identical. The case brief was identical, minus the mental illness. The takedown was identical. And here's the really wild part, which I found out after reading the affidavit, because you never know this when you're actually participating as part of the assets. SWAT is an asset. It is a tool that is used. Surveillance is a tool that is used. You don't get the full case brief. You don't know all the circumstances or all the investigative steps. What I found out was that just like all the other entrapment cases that we've seen, what they did was they intercepted a not firearm. I just need to hammer this home. In May of 2020, even against like the bullshit sort of way that the ATF operates, they still hadn't declared what are called polymer 80s. These are frames that you can mill out and create a weapon. It's a lower, then you have to put a parts kit in. There's a ton of work that has to go in. You don't just get it out of a box and put it on a drill and then start shooting it. In fact, if you start shooting it, it probably doesn't work even after you've done all the right things. In my experience, you got to be pretty good at it. So long and short, this guy bought a polymer 80, which was a legal purchase from eBay, which was a legal way to convey that, of a not firearm, because it needed a bunch of work, and it's considered 80%, which makes it not a gun, according to the federal government. Even then, it was not considered a gun. The FBI had it intercepted en route for him being a felon in possession. Now they've actually interfered with the mail service. They've probably actually broken federal law and claiming something that is not true and falsified an affidavit. They intercepted his property. Then they bought the eBay account from the eBay seller for $25,000 and began communicating with him in an online undercover way, trying to get him to agree to buy additional weapons. Then they introduced somebody locally, and then they introduced the undercover, and then they got that person to swear to ISIS. Should this guy be on the street? No way. The dude was dangerous. There was no doubt about it. But he was more of a danger to himself than anything else. Yeah. That's the incredible part. I know you've worked CT cases, so feel free to just spit on it. Yeah, well, honestly, both of these cases we've talked about today now, my experience and yours, it reminds me of a conversation Steve and I had on the American Radicals podcast yesterday. We had Trevor Aronson on, who I know you are fond of his book, The Terror Factory, and he's got a TED Talk out there and whatever. And this was the conversation we were having about these cases, about cases he's discovered. This is the playbook. This is what they do. I mean, think of what Kyle just said about this case. The effort, the time, the energy, the amount of money they put in to get. I'm going to say that, to get. That's what it was, to get this guy who really is just mentally disabled at this point because of what happened to him in a Saudi Arabian prison. Right. But we got to get him. What's even uglier is when we were getting briefed, the case agent, who I believe, because she's the one who signed this complaint, her name is Cynthia Hazel. She joined the FBI same time I did, 2016. So, she might have been in my class that I don't recall. We had a big enough class, or maybe she was in one of the earlier ones. She was probably at the academy. I almost a guarantee that we crossed paths at some point, physically in the same buildings. She briefed our team that you're probably going to have to kill this guy. There's almost no chance he's going to come in peacefully. That was the brief. You ever gotten that brief? No. Isn't that insane? It's completely insane. It's completely insane. You're probably going to have to kill him. And there was
the special agent in charge of Tampa was actually removed from all the calls and had to start self-censoring because he was on calls with the United States attorney in the area plus Maine Justice. It was the biggest single case going on in the FBI's counterterrorism world at that time. And he was briefing. The SAC, the top guy in the Tampa field office, was saying, someone just needs to kill this MFer. Let's just take this guy out. Like, a bunch of really crazy stuff was said on recorded calls to like 100+ people, to the point where my boss, who is a killer at the time, so my boss was a former HRT guy who had been a Ranger Battalion, West Pointer, one of those honorable people, by the way, doesn't work for the FBI anymore.
Go figure.
Yeah, and before retirement too, like the things he wanted us to work were like child exploitation cases. That's where he felt righteous. And my boss heard it, and he's like, look, dude, I've been on a lot of these calls. I've been on a lot of these briefs. He was a team leader for HRT. And the story in the FBI is when HRT, that's the hostage rescue team, our tier 1 SWAT team, when HRT shows up, people get dead. That's their internal little joke. But that's what happens. They send HRT when people need to get dead or when they need someone so dangerous that they're going to basically overwhelm them with the most capable operators they have. And they're super capable. You've probably seen it.
For sure.
They're really good. Yeah. My boss said this was...
my best friend from Wichita, a guy who I was on SWAT team with in Kansas City. We tried out together. He was a former cop. He's on HRT now. And
stud.
He's one of the few who still talks to me. I mean...
Yeah. No, they tend to be men of principles. And what's amazing is those men also know what real danger looks like most of the time. They have a pretty good assessment of it. They train for all the scenarios. And if your boss, who's a killer, comes to you and says, I've never heard anybody talk this recklessly before.
Right.
And he said, we basically need to button this up. He's like, I've never heard somebody say, we're going to have to kill this MFer on a call like that. Like, you might privately have a conversation like, dude, I don't know if we're going to be able to take this guy alive. That's a different conversation with your buddies than making a case brief and making it an official statement to the teams, because that goes in my surveillance log.
Well, and then inserting that into agents' heads. Now they're preempted with this. So anything this guy does, they're thinking gun, I'm going for my gun. And also, let's think of this in a broader FBI law enforcement context. Ever hear of a thing called due process, Mr. SAC? Like, give me a break. This is criminal law 101 right here.
It's just the basics of it. There's a presumption of innocence. By the way, that guy gave up like a kitten. They threw a flashbang at his feet. He gave up like a kitten. Here's the other sad story. And I covered this all on a podcast previously, but we got more audience. We got new audience. The saddest thing about this whole story was one of the sources that the FBI had, a cooperating witness, was his sister, who saw the problems. Now, I'm not sure if it's the older sister or the younger sister, but his younger sister also knew that there was some issues with this guy and wasn't so concerned about him being a menace that she actually allowed him to be around his nieces and nephews. He had three, I think he had 2 nephews and 1 niece. So she had 3 young children. She was in her, like, younger than him. So she had babies like 18, 19, 20 kind of thing. And he was 21, 22 at the time. Here's where it gets really crazy. The FBI flashbangs and arrests the brother. That girl breaks. Goes to a substation of the sheriff's department, unrelated to this case. The sheriff's department knew nothing about the background on it. She's crying outside on video camera. I could probably find the video of it. She's crying outside, and a local patrolman, a patrol deputy, comes out and says, "Hey, ma'am, can I help you?" She produces a 10-inch butcher knife from underneath her hijab because she's in full traditional garb. Tries to stab the deputy, catches him in the arm, and he shoots her and puts her down. Now we have 3 children that are going to grow up knowing exactly what happened, that their mom was put down by a cop with no further information about that. They were very young. They are always going to be without their mother. And she was put down because the FBI failed to do the simple thing, which was to take that guy in and get him mental help.
Right.
Which is what the sisters were reporting him for, that he's dangerous because he's got some problems with his mind. He's got these guns. We'd love it if you guys, like, they were asking for a Baker Act. They were asking for a mental health commitment. And the Bureau instead arrested, got the stats, and now that woman is dead.
The FBI did as much to destroy that family as the Saudi government did. Let that sit in. I mean, we know they're evil. Look what they did to Jamal Khashoggi. They assassinated him and chopped him up and took him out in a body bag.
Yeah, and then they dissolved him in acid.
Yeah, these are evil. This is evil, an evil regime. And your government did as much, maybe in some ways more, to destroy this family as that evil regime did.
I'm gonna tag another one too. I went to Pensacola to the naval base shooting. We did a whole show about this, about the guys who responded to it. We brought on We brought on one of the gentlemen who was actually one of the responders to that shooting. They were all Saudis as well. They were the Saudis that came in and killed Americans on American soil on a U.S. Navy base that were in pilot training. And then we just let them, they were probably PNG'd and sent home. Now, maybe they had their heads cut off at home. I don't know. I imagine that embarrassing the Saudi crown is probably not good. But they didn't get justice in America. Like all these guys that conspired, they were just deported. They just went back to wherever they came from. Or maybe they got medals for killing an American, for all I know. I don't know what the story was. I know that the military there was embarrassed. So they were showing some, sense of being contrite. But how crazy is it that you look at the double standard that's going on there? And this is the reasonableness thing that people have to understand. This stuff I learned after the fact when I read the affidavit, because you're not given an affidavit of what the case is when you're briefed on it. You weren't given an affidavit when you guys were outside that house. But here it is again. This is what you saw, which is very unsettling because of how nice a neighborhood it is, because there's an American flag hanging out there in the lights of that Bearcat, right? And that sense of unease is not the same thing as knowing that you are involved in something that is truly evil. It's important for people to understand that sense takes time to root and grow. And there's a reason why when I finally came out, and I know the same thing with you, it wasn't like, oh, I just saw something and I threw the bullshit flag. That's not how it works. Would you agree on that? I mean, it takes a while to understand because they're breaking a deep-seated trust that we've had in institutions. We're system idealists, as Steve likes to call it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, it definitely built over time. Definitely. I mean, that was February of 21. I didn't start speaking to Congress until November. So there had been, many more months in between there. And look, it wasn't everything every day that I thought or I had unease about or I thought was wrong, but it was building. And, I mentioned it earlier. I really want to hone in on this part. James 5, I just pulled this up. James 5, verse 16 says, therefore confess your sins to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. I really want to hone in on my apology to the Kuehne family for participating in this evil against them. And if anybody listening knows them, please try to get them in touch with me through Twitter at GOB Actual, through my attorneys, the Banal Law Group. Have their attorneys contact them, because I would like to apologize to them in person, not just on a podcast, but to actually tell them man to man or me to all of them, I am sorry. I'm sad I can't apologize on behalf of that entire SWAT team. And on behalf of the negotiator or case agent or whoever was in the door, which also should be another indicator that, is there a real threat here? Why do you have SWAT if you're going to just go up to the door anyways and talk to the wife and the child?
That's what that was. Let me throw it one more time up here. They literally just walk right past. Watch this.
I got the door. You guys go. Move it. They're ready. I'll tell you when you bring them in. Yep.
There's no shield blocking. There's nothing to keep her. Like, she's standing in basically a threat zone. That's a fatal funnel that she's standing in right there, because that's a hallway outside of a door. Well, that's where shots go. So there's a very lackadaisical attitude about that entry that doesn't, I mean, it looks like a training scenario to me, where you have players that are like out of play. It doesn't look like this is a lethal threat and we're going to move this woman into the snow because there's a possibility that we're going to catch rounds. These guys are walking in the way that they're supposed to. Smooth, right? Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. They're doing the thing that you're told, but you also have like bystanders and a guy who's looking away from where the threat zone would be, not covering down on it. You're just sending bodies through a doorway. By the way, unbroken glass, unbreached door, it looks like. Obviously it was a voluntary entry there. All these things are a big problem.
Clear. Yeah. I don't know that the regular agent who was there at the door, but that
looked like a local cop to me. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, I think it was one of the negotiators. I think.
Okay.
I don't know for sure, but what he was saying and how he was acting, I think, is like the part that makes me the most upset.
Mm-hmm.
And like don't tell my son. This is what I'm thinking.
It's okay, buddy. There's nothing okay about what's happening right there.
Nothing about this is okay.
That's right.
Like, learn your de-escalation or whatever better, but it's not that, dude. It's not that. Or don't, or just be the stoic FBI agent who and pull them out of the threshold at least then. But you approaching at all shows me you didn't think there was any threat there. So why is SWAT there?
It's gross. the reason why I wanted to cover this is because we all have instances of this. Everybody asks, like, how come people don't know? I think people are starting to grow. We're finding out. I had a friend reach out to me and tell me that the Office of General Counsel is giving briefings about EEO, and they're talking about the suspendables and rolling their eyes in it. That's kind of incredible to me. There's something pretty amazing about that being the case. I also got this kind of goofy, I don't know if I put it on the screen or not. Maybe I can throw it up on the screen here. I don't know if I have one. So let me throw it on the screen because I actually have it sitting on my desktop here. I want people to be able to read it. There's this amusing little moment where I went to Google AI and I asked them about the suspendables, which is amazing. So let's throw this up on the screen for folks to read it. Let's see. There's two things about this AI that are fun. First of all, Google AI apparently very woke and kind of racist and only has pictures of black people, but what I wrote was, who are the FBI suspendables? And this is what it showed. The term FBI suspendables is not an official designation used by the FBI. It seems to be used in two main contexts. One is a general term for FBI employees facing suspension, asterisk, or it could refer to any employee facing disciplinary action that could lead to suspension, blah, blah, blah. Importantly, it doesn't imply guilt or a specific accusation. It's just a status in the disciplinary process. Or two, in recent political controversies. Recently, some have used the term FBI suspendables to label certain FBI agents who have been suspended or facing disciplinary action. This usage typically comes blah, 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 blah. It comes after the groups or the individual are critical of the FBI, often claiming these suspensions are politically motivated or unfair. It's important to note that these claims are disputed. So Google wants to make sure that there is context to the suspendables label. I think that's kind of fun. It also says that using vague labels like suspendables is it's crucial to seek more information from more credible sources like established news outlets or the official reports. They can provide more accurate, nuanced information about personal actions within the FBI and avoid perpetuating potentially misleading narratives. You know, Garrett, that misleading narrative that the FBI is doing evil things. It's nice that Google's running cover. This bullshit chatbot is running cover for the Bureau as they continue to engage in obviously evil activity that is slowly growing, I think, at least in people's awareness.
Yeah, for sure. It's in a way, it's a double-edged sword. It's remarkable, this technology. It's crazy that it can even just curate that. But then, probably because of the programmers, it curates it in a not entirely truthful manner, which, of course, that's to be expected. That's exactly what the FBI would want. Just as they curated the case you were involved with, the case I was involved with, the Whitmer takedown Steve was involved with, and many, 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 many other cases. They curate them in this false way. So, I guess it's par for the course with Google AI.
I guess it's expectable, but it is not my favorite thing to see. We were going to cover down on this shooting that happened in Lakewood. We'll do that another time. Maybe I'll cover it on Friday. So folks, we'll stick around. The body cam footage came out there. I have some thoughts on what happened in that church, but the overwhelming sense that I have is you must continue to be your own first responder. You can't rely on organizations like this. You can't rely on them to do the right thing. You shouldn't talk to the FBI if they come and knock on your door. I think Garrett would back that one up for me.
100%. Yep.
Tell people where the easiest place to follow. I've been throwing up your handle on the screen. You now unlocked your Twitter, so anybody who's following on X can actually go after you now, and they can do it. You want to go ahead and plug anywhere that people might want to follow you?
Yeah, GOB Actual on Twitter, Instagram, Truth. My Substack, lastline.substack.com, and of course the-suspendables.com if you want to get some merch. Those would be best. But yeah, GOB Actual is now open on Twitter, so by all means, come and give me a follow if you want. When I was in DC last week, I told my attorneys that I basically just tweet Bible verses and shots at the FBI. So if they have a problem with the Bible and my First Amendment right, well, they already had a problem with me. So how much does it really matter? And then your friend Dan Bongino, a true supporter of the suspendables, put me in a tweet with you and Steve and a long list of other people. And I thought, I think it's time. So,
yeah. And you had some pretty good coverage on that too, which is a lot of people I think have started to find you available and follow you. You just said Dan Bongino. Look at this. They just made me aware of this. Dan covered my tweet the other day about what's going on and the story that we had covering down with Victor Avila. So that's always good times too. Let me read one of our sponsors. I'm going to give you a palate cleanser as we go into the rest of the day today on Weird Wednesday. First, let me just say thanks to the folks over at 4Patriots. patriots.com/Kyle. That's how you get to the website. If you guys want to get the deals, if you want to tag us on it, it tags any of your purchases should you choose to make one. You're going to go to the 4 patriots.com/Kyle. And what are you going to find there? You're going to find continuity of comms, continuity of calories. What does that mean? That means that you are not going to be the person who's looking around in an emergency when you know that you can't rely on law enforcement, you can't rely on the logistics or the supply chain that you're used to. You can actually go and stockpile your food. You can get a solar generator. You can get a solar battery pack. You can have all kinds of options that will allow you to continue your life. Give yourself a little bit of breathing room in an emergency. Anybody who has ever been through survival school knows that you can live for, a couple weeks without food, but you're going to be absolutely miserable. If you're Garrett, you're going to be a totally grouchy, grumpy guy. Nobody's going to want to be around you, and you're not going to want to be around you. So you can hedge against that sort of chaos. And I keep saying it in the chat here, but we're going to see some Western experience in this country, whether it's locally, regionally, or nationally. The evil doesn't like to give up very easily. And so I recommend you guys get yourself prepared, figure it out for yourself. And if you guys want to go to 4 Patriots, again, the 4 patriots.com/Kyle, that's where you can go to our sponsor that has lots of different options for preparation. Garrett, are you ready for a little palate cleanser?
Certainly.
Okay.
Certainly.
Let's try this. I think this is where I put my dad joke of a couple of them here. There's a couple of silly ones, including a long form silly one. So let's just throw this up on and take a deep breath.
What do you call the sexuality where you're attracted to men and women, but they're not attracted to you? By yourself.
My wife said to me, what starts with F and ends with K? I said, no, it doesn't.
Tequila may not fix your life, but it's worth a shot.
My boss asked me why I get sick only on work days. I said, I don't know. It must be my weekend immune system.
My doctor told me I was going deaf. That news was hard to hear.
I hired a handyman and gave him a to-do list. But when I got home, only items 1, 3, and 5 got done. Turns out he only does odd jobs.
What did Newton think when he discovered gravity? Is about to go down.
How do you get 100 math teachers into a room that only fits 99? You carry the one.
Let's just leave it right there, buddy. Just a little bit. For some reason, the one I like the most is doing the odd jobs. We're only doing 1, 3, and 5. I could handle that. Those guys look funny, and also, like, I'll say this in a completely heterosexual way. Like, I like the way that they look. Like, they're aesthetically pleasing as men to me. And I want to hang out with dudes who have mustaches and like the same haircut as me. I just want to kick it with and the guy with the weird wraparound shades. I always want to hang out with that guy too. Just want to be like, I want them to be my neighbors so we can go outside and just sort of say dry jokes while our kids are playing out in the front yard. And maybe I will. Maybe when I move, that will be the next thing for us. Anyway, I appreciate you coming on and giving this context. We kind of teased it out there that nobody was going to see who it was. Isn't it interesting how many things you and I have had fingers on? Between you, me, and Steve, we've touched almost everything that has gone on in the FBI in the last couple of years.
It's weird, man. And that, to me, you won't be surprised, it's divine.
Mm-hmm.
We have been put on a different path. It certainly is not always easy. Yeah, it is not always easy. But Isaiah 6:8, here am I, send me.
That's it. You know what? I've been reading some of the other pieces that were just done. It was Abraham, when God calls out his name and asks him to sacrifice his son, right? And he goes after Isaac. The answer is also, here I am. It's. I wonder what the actual Hebrew words are. I'm sure there's been plenty of studies, but the answer is, here I am, when somebody calls your name and you make yourself available for that call. I know that you and I both have that same experience. I got the merch store. Let me cue it up here, and you want to do the talking over it, and I'll just point at my shirt. Here we go.
Yeah. The-suspendables.com. Promo code Kyle will get you 10% off. As Kyle always says, he doesn't gain anything from that other than we just kind of track if people are listening to the show and if that's where the traffic is coming from. He's got the Substack shirt up there, which is one of my favorites. That's one of my very first designs. I never thought it would end up on a t-shirt, but it has. So you can get one of those, or you can get the Night Ops version. We got PVC patches. We've got lapel pins. I think the PVC patches, if you add 4 to your cart, it's like 3, get 1 free. The pins, if you add 3 to your cart, it'll be $30 instead of $45. And yeah, there's sticker packs, there's t-shirts, there's Ranger panties. It was 73 degrees here yesterday, but today it's like 25. So
standard. I heard that there is a baby in the background, which must mean it is time for us to wrap this thing up. Folks, thanks very much for joining us. Let me do a 5-star review, but thanks, Garrett, for being on with me and for sharing this story, which I think is relevant for context for everybody. And we'll see you soon, buddy.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, as always.
All right. 5-star review. Ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Coming in from Las Hermanas. Hey, Kyle. Love your program. I've been listening since the inception. Bravo. I also like Rumble, but I don't have time to watch, and I love to listen. Rumble uses a lot of phone battery also. I'm old, and I run on a tight budget. Thanks again, Anna. Well, Anna, that's a really thoughtful, and I appreciate it. I'm a huge appreciator of people that leaving me all their interesting notes. You know that the batteries are rechargeable, right? I don't know if that cuts into your budget all that much, but if it does, understood. We like that you're getting it from Apple, and we appreciate the 5-star review. Folks, you can leave your own 5-star review by going to the show notes. Just click right through it. Or if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or others, they all have an opportunity to either leave comments or to leave one of those 5-star reviews. We appreciate you doing it. We're coming up on 1,000 on Apple. That's no nothing. And obviously, if you're watching us on Rumble, make sure you've given us a thumbs up as you've listened to this, and make sure you're following the channel. You can subscribe to it for $5 a month. That comes straight to us. No middleman. It's better than a Rumble rant, it turns out. It's just $5 a month, and it's 22 cents a show. And what that means is that it's going to go with no vig. They're not taking a piece of it. They don't charge us anything for the processing. So that's really cool if you guys want to support it. You can only do that on the PC, by the way. You have to be on the PC while the show is running to do the follow and subscribe bit. But we appreciate it if you want to. That's it for today's show, y'all. I appreciate you all listening. I really do appreciate you having the interest and the context. We had a pretty good number here in the live chat this morning. We're no Dan Bongino, but we are slowly building up a loyal number of people that care about nuance, context, the gray area between what is black and what is right. You know, there's a simple and much more complicated explanation. It's simple in so much as that there's just no easy answers. But the complicated part is that we have to actually look for it. You have to want it, and you have to know that the knee-jerk reaction is probably not correct, which is tough because we all want to make those spot judgments. We want to be headline readers. Here we read the deeper context. We read the fine print. So we'll see you guys again tomorrow on Thursday. Hope you guys are having a great day. I hope it's not 26 where you are. I hope it's closer to 75. And God bless you. See you in the morning.
Thanks for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.